Hey everyone, I have some news. I'm autistic. I guess it's better to be direct and get it out into the open right away. I really should have scripted this ahead of time is what I'm finding out now. But yeah, basically what you need to know is I'm autistic. I was diagnosed last month officially, but the suspicions have sort of gone on for over a decade, nearly 2 decades at this point. But I wanted to share a little bit about my journey to this point, as well as some of the ways that it affects me currently. And the reason that I wanted to talk about specifically that, the latter bit, is because autism is not a one-size-fits-all condition. It manifests differently for different people of different genders and of different ages. So I wanted to talk about how it affects me, because I know from my own internalized ableism as an adult that what the media puts out is that people who are autistic are just like the Sheldon Coopers, the Rain Mans, which I'm not saying people can't be like that, but it's not the whole picture. But before we get to all that, I just want to take you on a little bit of a journey. So, I've always been quite quiet. I have always had difficulty making friends, especially long-term friends. You know, group settings are not my thing. Change is hard. So all of these sort of factors were, you know, pointed out when I was very young. I mean, I was probably at as young as 6 years old when my parents were first approached by one of my teachers that I may be on the autism spectrum. Or that I might have what was then deemed Asperger's. That sort of continued until I was about 15, I want to say. We were on vacation. One of my great aunts works with special needs kids, or at least did at the time, and spoke to my mom about, you know, a lot of the things that had been raised. And that was when my mom took me out quietly on the lake we were visiting and talked to me about Asperger's at that point. Asperger's and autism were 2 different diagnoses at that point. It gave some context for me in terms of things that I was having difficulty with. You know, I was quiet. I was obsessed with various bits of media. I think at that point it would have been probably How to Train Your Dragon or Narnia, or both. After all that, my parents, you know, put forth the idea of being tested for this and being diagnosed with, again, at that point we were diagnosing for Asperger's. So we went through the process. We went through a Christian service because that sort of thing is not cheap. And this is what we could afford at the time. And so I had therapy sessions, and I also, when I was 17, did the whole day testing thing. So I went in, they gave me various tests that were, in hindsight, quite clearly meant for young kids. You know, that was that. And we got the results about a month or 2 months later. This is at the end of the school year that I got tested. I'd just been picked up from fine arts camp, and we are on our way to Colorado for a vacation. And the diagnosis was, they couldn't say either way. As a matter of fact, I have the paperwork with me now. I'm not going to read directly from it, but what it basically boiled down to was, you brought her in at the wrong age. Oh my gosh, which is such a dumb excuse. We had paid all this money, and they're like, well, we think she might have Asperger's, at the time, but also that was on the way out as a diagnosis at that point. And I think they were also hesitant to diagnose me with something that may or may not be valid in a couple years' time, which is, again, not a sufficient enough excuse in my opinion. But they also said if you had brought her in when she was a kid, probably would have diagnosed her. There will probably be difficulties when she's an adult that, you know, may result in a diagnosis later, but right now we just don't feel like saying either way. Which, now that I think about it, it's a slippery slope, because a lot of, you know, things in my life, my adult life, happened to bring me up to where I am today, and I don't know how many of that would change if I got the diagnosis then, but there we are. And so, and again, because there was not a lot of research or public representation for women with autism, and there were, you know, people had very specific ideas of what autism is, and so I was like, well, that's that. And, you know, we didn't have enough money to, you know, go and do this again, and frankly, I wasn't really, you know, up for doing that again at that point. And so I sort of let it be. And I was just like, okay, well, I'm probably just, you know, very hyper anxious and, you know, other things, and maybe it's something else. So I went through my adult life. I went to a Christian college. I was on my own for the first time, and that, you know, not the greatest of experiences, all things considered, especially, you know, coming out as bisexual during that period. So I went on, and I met Tim, my spouse, and, you know, we sort of had, we both had our mental health problems, but we've developed this camaraderie and communication to sort of help each other get through life, basically. And that's been wonderful. And then, after I moved over here, I had thought for a few times about going through the NHS to get a diagnosis, because, you know, that's an option that was free over here. Obviously knowing that the NHS has really long wait times at the moment, and it has its various issues when it comes to mental health conditions and whatnot. But I was like, oh, I'll eventually get to it. I'll get to it. And then, I don't know if I've mentioned this on camera, but in January 2022, I was a victim of a telephone scam of somebody pretending to be a HMRC. I was in the middle of doing my taxes at the time, and they were saying, like, you know, you owe us this much money, you've messed up, you've done this, you've done that. And I didn't pick up on the social cues that this was a scam. Like, the language they used was very, like, attacking, and I didn't know what to do except to, like, make this go away by paying money. And I lost £2,000 because of that. And it was really traumatic. And it was at that point where I was just like, I can't put off trying to get a diagnosis anymore, because this, you know, if something like this can happen to me, in my head, like, I know, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, scammers, whatever. But, like, my brain was in such a place where I went into panic mode, and I couldn't interpret. I was not okay. And so I knew I had to do something or find out something in order to make sure that nothing like that happened again. The week after, I referred myself in to the Leeds Autism Diagnostic Service, because I live in Leeds, and started that process. And I had an initial appointment, it was about 4 hours, initial assessment appointment in May 2022, and then began the long wait times. And during that period, and especially throughout 2023, I started doing research on how autism symptoms can manifest as an adult. And I found out so much about myself. it was very much a process of like, these things are hard for me, but I never considered that, you know, aside from the really obvious like autism symptoms that get talked about, that these were also a thing. Autistic burnout is a thing. I've had periods where I cannot do anything. You're wondering why I haven't made a video in forever. It's because work takes up so much energy. And masking, not COVID masking, but masking my symptoms, which is a thing that every autistic person does in order to function in a neurotypical society that was not built for us. You know, I have to mask in a front-facing, customer-facing job to, you know, look like a functional human being. And, you know, getting in and out, commuting in, that's hard. Everything was so hard for me, and sensory was so hard for me. And I ended up going through a really intense, you know, period of burnout that I still had to work through. You know, I think there was only like 1 or 2 days where I could even bring myself to be like, I can't go in, I can't. Because I was just like, I don't have a good enough excuse. But like, there were times where it would be time to like go get the groceries 5 minutes away from our house, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't face the world. It was gonna be too hard for me, too sensorily hard for me. And it was tough. It was also tough this year recognizing that this is in fact a disability. Even before I was diagnosed in November, finally. And it was also hard to get people to recognize that, you know, once I realized all of the disabling aspects of being autistic, because it is a disability, it was hard to get the support I needed because I didn't have an official piece of paper that said I had autism or that I was autistic. There I was, going into work 4 days in a row, answering telephone calls, you know, greeting customers and such, and it just wore so thin on me. And I was also in a job where I had a lot put on me in terms of responsibility, and some things I liked more than others, and sometimes it was easier, and sometimes it was harder. And as a side note, before I continue, you may notice that I'm tripping over my words a whole lot. I didn't script this. If I had more energy in me, I would. But scripting also is a reason why I'm able to speak a bit more coherently, especially in some of my review videos. Those I script out exactly ahead of time so I don't trip over my words. But I am here. One of the things about being autistic is that sometimes my brain moves faster than I can think, or vice versa. That didn't sound correct. Sometimes my mouth makes sounds before my brain can form the thoughts that go along with them. So, you know, if I'm tripping over my words in this video, that's fine. But I also want to, you know, be in my natural state. But it made me realize, like, okay, this is why, like, I need to, you know, I'm moving my legs, I move my hands a lot, I play a lot of 2048 and Minesweeper because it's very repetitive. You know, I have all these stimming behaviors that I've become a bit more comfortable this year using because I had that so suppressed, especially as an adult. And it's also unlocked a lot of, you know, memories that I've, you know, been able to put more in context in hindsight, but that are also really, really painful because I was the weird kid who hyperfixated on everything, and you know, people didn't want to be friends with me because of that. And I did have friends, and I do have friends. But especially as an adult where, you know, you don't necessarily have the means to sort of go out and meet people as much, and especially if you're like me and you just don't have the social energy to do that, it's hard. And that's, I think, why I gravitated toward online people. I met my spouse online. And most of my close friends that I met through that Eurosite, we've only met in person a few times, but I've you know, online friendships are valuable. But eventually, you know, I had to cut back on a lot of things that I was overcommitting myself to, because I was just like, well, neurotypical people can do this. You know, you have like your hobbies on the side and you have your work, but sometimes I just don't have the energy to do things outside of work. And I didn't want to commit myself to anything that, you know, I wasn't able to follow through on. And so that's a very long-winded way of saying I don't write for the Eurosite anymore, but I do, you know, support them in all their endeavors, and please continue to follow them. They do wonderful, wonderful work. But yeah, so all of this past year was about learning to adapt and learning what I needed and learning to voice my concerns. I mentioned in my Eurovision experience review that I had a really bad experience at the Eurovision Village because there just wasn't a space for me to go and calm down. And something that I really hope changes for next year, but unfortunately it meant that like my experience was sort of tainted by that. And it wasn't just because I was pissed that Finland didn't win. You know, like neurotypical people were mad that Finland didn't win, but like it was a very intense environment, and everyone's just like, why don't you put yourself in? I don't think that I need to remove myself from environments for things that I love, like concerts and Eurovision and things like that, just because the environment is not made for not neurotypical people. That's the onus is on them to change and to be more accessible. So around May, I ordered my hidden disability sunflower lanyards, and it took so long for me to get them because I was worried that people wouldn't believe I was autistic because I didn't have the slip of paper. They did have a letter from the diagnosing agency that I was on their waiting list, was in their care. But then I switched jobs. I needed something where I was in a more hybrid position. I needed something that was going to be less stressful. And I like the job I have a lot more now. And I appreciate the people I worked with my old job, but I just needed a change. So all that being said, my office is cleaner now because I have a job where half the week I work from home in a sensory environment that I can control. I can have my headphones in, I cannot. I need background noise. And even when I'm in the office, I tend to have really soft ASMR playing in my headphones, and that's fine. And I have my lanyard. I wear it publicly pretty much wherever I go, unless I'm like going to the corner shop. Because, you know, I don't think there's shame in, or there shouldn't be shame in, you know, having a disability and being public about it. Because it's hard when, you know, you've been taught to behave a certain way your whole life to admit that you need extra help doing things. And that's been one of the hardest things for me to learn, is that I want to be able to do things to the best I can, and I want to be able to contribute. And, you know, there are days where I'm way more capable of that. And then there are days where I just can't. I had a really bad experience coming home for Christmas the other day because we were on a train that we had reserved seats for, and they canceled a bunch, and so we were stuck in the luggage area for 2 hours, and it was just, I had a bit of a meltdown. I was in a small confined space. I had to keeping my balance. People were being very loud, very noisy. We couldn't get to our reserved seats, and that's on the train company. And I got home and I just sort of let it out. I had to cry. And I was, you know, there was a lot of crying this Christmas. Not because I had a terrible Christmas, but also because, like, you know, my family that I'd grown up with, my mom especially, I wasn't home with them. I haven't been in TC for a Christmas since 2017. And that was a hard thing to realize. So that is definitely a goal for next year, is to have Christmas at home with my family. But all this is to say, in October I got a letter saying that my diagnosis would be expected by the end of November I had an appointment. Then I had that appointment, and after talking a bit more about what had happened in between the initial assessment a year and a half prior, and now, I've been officially diagnosed, and I wasn't sure leading up to it how I was going to feel. And I think the biggest feeling I had coming out of that was validation. It was validation in knowing that the clinic that initially assessed me when I was 17 years old was wrong. It was validation for people believing me when I said I had this disability, even though I'm not a young boy. I am an adult woman. And we had a really long talk about all the things that I'd already put in place. You know, my workplace has been really receptive to my requests and have really stood up for me, which is absolutely lovely. And Tim has just been absolutely incredible. Sometimes I ask him if he feels like my carer. Because you know me, I wouldn't, be an autistic person if I wasn't constantly worried about how I came off to other people. You may notice in the entire video I've sort of been averting my eyes from the lens. You're not even a person! I'm averting my eyes from the lens. As I say, what do I do now? I work from home half the week. I manage my energy a bit more carefully. I have music, podcasts, ASMR videos to listen to while I work. I have the things that bring me so much joy. I, have the TV that I like, the movies that I like. I tend to go for comfort movies more than anything else, which is maybe why I've seen Barbie 4 times this year. Christmas has always been a big thing for me that I've enjoyed, partly because of my family. So we've gone kind of full on with the Christmas this year. We watched a bunch of Christmas movies. We put up our tree in November. Part of my journey has been discovering autistic creators and listening to the stories of other autistic people, and not only finding out that there's a lot of people like me, but also getting advice from those sorts of people. One of those people is Chloe Hayden, who's an autistic actress who plays an autistic character on Heartbreak High. Sorry for the lighting. And her podcast, her book, Different Not Less, her YouTube feed. For me, I think sought out women creators who are around my age, who are autistic, because our stories are the ones that kind of tend to be sidelined. So hers was much more of a narrative thing, but it was one of those things where I was reading a book and I was just like, yep, okay, this is me. And then the same thing when I was reading Unmasking Autism by Dr. Devin Price. I have to say, this and several other narratives came from my local queer bookshop. But this is still sort of a narrative in the same vein about being an autistic person and navigating in a neurotypical world, or a world that was built for neurotypicals. And this one is a lot more academic. So this is definitely on Tim's reading list. I've asked him to read these narratives in the same way that he's asked me to read narratives that pertain to him, because we're both on journeys and we're here to learn more about each other. It also means I have been fully engaging in my hyperfixations. I've watched a lot of figure skating. As you may know, for the last couple of months, I have done a couple of live streams where I updated my figure skating stat spreadsheets, because I'm an absolute nerd. Oscar season is here. Pay your writers, pay your actors, please. I know the strikes are over, but forever a struggle. And speaking of, I found my master's thesis screenplay from 2019 that I hadn't touched in years, and I read it. And I accidentally wrote an autistic main character. As you do. I was just thinking of the character as I would think. The characters think how I would think, and that never crossed my mind to be maybe this character is autistic. So there. Yay. Oh my gosh. But, you know, following on from that, it's something that I may be inspired to pick up and try to draft again this year. Where do I want to leave this? Because I've been rambling forever, and obviously, you know, there's an opportunity for me to talk more specifically about different aspects of my life and coping mechanisms and advice and whatnot. I guess I would encourage you to do your own research. That includes talking to people who are autistic and looking up autistic narratives, but also looking at academic sources. I think, you know, there's the books that I've mentioned, the creators that I've mentioned, but there's also resources like National Autistic Society. I'll tell you one resource not to go to, and that is Autism Speaks. Please avoid them like the plague. They are not a productive organization. And also, please avoid all these moms on social media who like make a career out of complaining about their autistic kids publicly and, you know, portraying themselves as such a martyr for doing this. I don't doubt that it's tough raising an autistic kid. My mom raised me, but they should not be a scapegoat for that. So please avoid those types of people, and I don't know, listen to autistic adults. Please, 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 please listen to us. Actually, you know what? I will end on this final point. So, when you hear about autistic people, you may hear the phrase, autism is a superpower. And I appreciate that that is a sentiment that helps kids feel better about themselves, and that there are things about being autistic that, you know, do make you great. I love that, you know, I love keeping track of organizing things, and that's not necessarily something that neurotypical people, you know, can get on board with. I love being so passionate about the things that I love and being excited about them, and that's one of the things that I love. But I think having the mindset that autism is a superpower is ignoring the disability part of it. Because yes, there are good things about being autistic, but there are also some really debilitating things that unfortunately society has not been able to cater to us for. We still live in a society that is largely neurotypical. I think, you know, one of the things we discovered during the pandemic about working from home is, you know, sort of how freeing it is, and forcing people back into the office was kind of hell on autistic people, myself included. Okay, we're gonna end this properly because, as we've learned after I have a very long break from YouTube, I sometimes forget to put a fully loaded memory card in. Or, in this case, I did put a fully loaded one in and just kept talking for way too long. Anyways, where was I? I was talking about autism being a superpower, but also a disability. Yes, I think in order to accept autistic people, or how I want to be accepted, is don't only value autistic people for the benefits that they can have for you or for your workplace. Because there are things that we can really do really good about work. But in order to accept that, you also should accept the more difficult aspects of someone's autism. And that includes making concessions for them. That means accepting that they may not always be in the mood to talk. And I'm really lucky that I am now in a space where I can do the work that I need to do, and that I also work with people who are very accepting and accommodating of my needs. And that is how we should be operating. And we should also be making it easier for people to get diagnosed that want to. But that's another conversation for another day. In the meantime, I want to make videos. Unfortunately, the editing process always proves a bit difficult, because when I work, I need to have some sort of sound coming in my ears, which I really can't when I'm editing. So I'm not going to make any promises about when I will upload content. That will just be as and when I have the energy and the focus and the excitement to do so. So with that in mind, thank you for watching this. I hope that you've gained a little bit more of a perspective on where I am at with my personal journey. If you are autistic, please share your own journey in the comments, and I'm always willing to learn from other people's experience, because though I have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, the key word there is it is a spectrum, and I am on the, I don't like the term higher or / lower functioning, but the truth is I am a bit more able to mask my symptoms than others, painful as it is for me. So please tell me about your experiences and tell me how you've been able to fit in the world, and some advice, and I don't know, let's start a conversation. I'm kind of relieved that I can be really open about this now. I'm 28 years old, and I, have just learned and accepted this big, huge thing about me. And am I a bit sad that some of that progress was stifled by a misdiagnosis or lack thereof over 10 years ago? Yes, but I'm here now. I've learned a lot about myself now. I'm learning to be open and proud of who I am, and also asking for help when I need it. So that's where I'm gonna end. Yeah, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one, whether it be a video, whether it be a live stream. All my links are down below. I am on Blue Sky now, although I still post quite a bit on Twitter. You can see my spreadsheets or my live streams and all the fun stuff that I am doing at the moment. Yeah, thanks so much for being on this journey with me, and I will see you again soon-ish. Remember to keep living awesome lives, and yeah, bye.